Hi, my name is Mason and I work for Comet Backup here in New Zealand. Welcome along to another Technical Highlights webinar. This is episode 17. And during these videos, I usually talk for about half an hour on some Comet topics, talk about best practice tips, IT industry news, and I give one of these Comet technical presentations every month. And on the webinar platform, you can sign up for notifications about when we go live. And I'm coming to you live today. It's 9 a.m. here in New Zealand. I realize some of you might not quite be up to September 29th, but we are. So if you're viewing this live on our webinar platform, you'll see on the right-hand side of the screen, there's a chat widget. So feel free to pop in any questions that you have. They'll be sent privately to me. And at the end of my presentation, I have a few minutes to answer any questions that you have. So if anything springs to mind, you need any clarifications, just write it in and I'll do my best to answer it at the end. We are aiming for half an hour only, with some time at the end for questions. I know all of our Comet partners, IT companies, MSPs, service providers, you're all very busy people. So a big thank you for taking time out of your day to catch up on the latest Comet Backup news with me. I do really appreciate it, and hopefully you can all take away some useful information. After the live presentation, this webinar will also be uploaded to our YouTube channel, so that's another way you can catch up. Can't take live questions on YouTube, so that's a special benefit for being able to make this time slot. But of course, questions are welcome anytime in the support tickets. Moving right along, I do these every month. Just to quickly recap what happened last month. Last month, I talked about Comet 21.8 Amalthea. So this was our quarterly release. That's a picture of one of Jupiter's moons, actually taken by the Voyager spacecraft back in the 70s. So Voyager and Amalthea, it's a really cool tie-in for us because Amalthea is the name of our quarterly release, and that quarterly release includes 100% translation coverage. And I also talked about how you can help us improve these translations. It also includes the new test connections feature for storage vaults, so you can make sure you've typed in your passwords correctly. The advanced filter for wildcard include paths and wildcard regex. So if you want to back up all docx files in C drive, you can do that now with a wildcard include. And we also had a big summary of Office 365 status update and all the improvements we've been focusing on this last quarter. So that was last month, and if you're interested in learning anything more about those topics, the previous webinar is available to watch again on our YouTube channel. So that was last time. This month, there's been lots of exciting new development recently that I can tell you about. So there's a lot to catch up on, so I hope you got a coffee, and let's get stuck into it. Anti-Ransomware with Backblaze B2. So earlier this month, I was invited to a panel discussion with MCSoft, the antivirus and endpoint security EDR vendor, and we had a long-ranging discussion about a lot of security topics. And one of the things that came up was ransomware. Obviously, there's a major issue affecting the IT industry, and your backup solution is a major part of a good defense against ransomware. I'm not going to summarize the whole discussion here. I do have some real new Comet features that I'm leading towards talking about. But I need to provide some appropriate context, which is talking about ransomware. And how can you defend against a ransomware attack? And the most useful way to think about your defense is with layers of protection. Take, for example, malware that's delivered by a phishing email, and how you could stop that from causing damage. The first line of defense is anti-spam, your email security products, and hopefully that catches it. But if it breaks through those, maybe your staff have anti-phishing training. If that's not enough, surprisingly, if you look up the statistics for anti-phishing training, it's rough. It moves the needle, but no matter what you do, the big organizations never quite seem to get high pass rates at all. We can all do our best, but a common sense about what you click on is hugely important, but statistically, it's not enough. It's not a good defense. Everyone gets phished, even people who know they're about to be phished. So hopefully your next layer, the antivirus or endpoint security product will catch it. And if it breaks through that, then we've just got what the OS gave us. So maybe running as a limited permission user account will stop it doing any damage, but if it breaks through that, elevates its permission, moves laterally across the network, maybe an internal firewall can stop that. And if perish the thought, it does run and do its thing, then after all of that, you've still got your backup. But backup here is the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff. It's the last resort when all of these other ransomware defenses have all failed. And we work quite hard to make it, really easy and seamless to restore data inside Comet. But of course, it's still a bit of work. You'd rather not be in that position. So having a backup should let you recover from any kind of ransomware attack. And generally speaking, you are safe with a backup at this point, 9 times out of 10. Except I hate to have to tell you this, but it is possible that sufficiently advanced malware will also damage your backups. If malware is running on the same PC as Comet, then it can look at the network traffic, it can sniff the access keys, it can install a debugger, it can install a kernel extension, it can hook its fingers right into Comet's brain and do anything Comet can do. And if Comet can delete backup snapshots, then so can the ransomware, which is a bit tragic because Comet really does need the ability to delete things. We want retention to work, we want lock and index coordination to work, and in order to do that, we need to be able to delete files for Comet to go about its everyday business, which means we can't necessarily just restrict our deletion permissions, but we can improve the status quo here. There are a few tricks that you can use that work really well with Comet. We just need to be quite specific about it. To start with, if you're using Comet Server storage role and you're hosting the data yourself on local hard drives, then you should consider taking disk snapshots. You can do that with VSS on Windows or LVM ZFS Btrfs on Linux. And a sufficiently advanced malware knows how to delete VSS snapshots, but it can only do that on the local PC. It can't do that over the storage role protocol to another computer. So if you've got disk snapshots on your storage role server, malware comes through and says, breaks into Comet's access keys and uses that access to delete everything. Now, lucky you, it just did those deletions client side, and so on your storage role server, you've got everything in a disk snapshot. That's great for storage role. What about direct to cloud? I'm going to pick on two of the storage providers we've been talking about a lot recently, Wasabi and Backblaze B2. Two of the cloud storage providers, they're major commercial providers, but also value-oriented, and that's made them very popular to use with Comet. Starting with Wasabi, you can make use of Wasabi's versioning feature. If you enable versioning on the bucket, then when Comet deletes a file, it creates what's called a deleted version on top of the real file version. The real file version is still there underneath the deleted version. And you can configure Wasabi to keep such deleted versions for 30 days. And Comet only uses the S3 delete object action, not the S3 delete object version action. So any malware impersonating Comet's credentials would still be unable to delete the underlying files. And you can then roll back to those deleted versions as needed in the event of something happening. The main added security here is restricting Comet from being able to do a full delete. And this IAM key restriction is already fully in place if you're using the requestable storage feature for Wasabi. The access keys that are generated do not have the delete object version action. If you're manually creating key pairs for Comet, you'll have to check that access control yourself. But this is a genuine security feature, and it applies to both direct to Wasabi and also storage role proxying towards Wasabi. So you can make use of Wasabi's versioning feature behind a storage role proxy. And the reason I'm talking about all this, because what is actually a brand new feature in Comet 21.9.4 released this week is some brand new deep integration with Backblaze B2's file versioning feature here. So for Backblaze B2, Comet does try to fully delete a file and all its versions. So we've added this new advanced hide deleted files option. And if you check this box, Comet will only hide the file on B2. That creates a deleted version on top of the real file version. And once again, you can use B2's lifecycle policies to actually delete files a few days after that. The important next step is actually making sure the key pair in Comet settings does not have the permissions to fully delete files. And this is so that if any ransomware sticks its fingers in Comet's brain, that ransomware impersonating Comet would be unable to cause any permanent damage to the backed up data. So what we want to do is actually revoke the delete permission from the B2 application key in the B2 settings. There's two ways to do that. You can do it manually from the Backblaze web interface. But the main way going forward for new direct-to-cloud Backblaze storage is that these are, the access keys that's used for the storage vault are provisioned via the requestable storage vault system in the Comet auth role. So this is the template that stamps out, we use these master keys to stamp out new access keys for each individual storage vault for the customers. And we've added this new checkbox in the requestable settings that when the per customer keys get created from this template, it's created with these restricted permissions that force it into this new lifecycle workflow. And all of this adds up to, I've kind of rambled on a little bit about it, but it's actually a perfect anti-ransomware defense. Looking back over all of these layers, if the ransomware makes it all the way through your normal defenses, you can restore from backup. And even if the backup gets trashed, then on the other side of this airtight hatchway, you've got a rolling version snapshot of that backup storage. It's like air gapping, but for the cloud generation, it's airtight, at least, and definitely something to consider introducing into your Comet environment. And if you are thinking of making big changes to your Comet environment, moving on to my next new feature topic is support for running Comet Server on ARM64. If you're using Comet Server self-hosted, the next time you go and download an update for it, you'll see the number of Linux options has grown from 3 to 6 because we've added support for ARM64. You might be familiar with ARM from pretty much anything. It's in the smallest cell phone. Just look at the size of this motherboard. This is an iPhone. If you've ever assembled a desktop PC recently, you know how big and bulky a motherboard is. This little thing in the picture is probably faster thanks to ARM. And ARM is also in the world's current most powerful supercomputer, the Fugaku in Japan, that's currently helping everyone out with COVID research. So it's in the smallest and the biggest, and it's really just a matter of time before it fills up the middle use cases too, PCs and business grade servers. And we're starting to see that with a few cloud services in particular, where you can get these brand new ARM CPUs that perform better and are cheaper. And that's been the dream, the promise of ARM servers for a decade with Cavium and Marvel, ThunderX2 servers. And it's actually finally come true. Basically all thanks to the Neoverse N1 core that is powering all the latest and greatest cloud servers on the market, starting with Amazon AWS and their recent lineup with Graviton 2 CPUs. So you can go ahead and rent one of these on AWS. They get this 40% number because it's 20% faster than a Xeon for 20% cheaper. So that gives you this overall 40% price performance improvement, which is a phenomenal number. So that's one option. Oracle Cloud. I don't normally say good things about Oracle, but they are giving away in their free forever tier a quad-core Ultra A1 with 24 gigs of RAM. This is the same Neoverse core design. This thing is phenomenally fast and it's free forever. So it's a great platform to learn about ARM Linux, what's different and what's the same. But basically everything's the same. It's got Ubuntu, Debian, CentOS. You can apt-get install stuff, Docker works, and we've long since supported Comet Backup running on ARM CPUs. The only thing that was missing was Comet Server. So we needed to make an ARM64 version of Comet Server, and here we are as of Comet 21.9.4 Voyager. You can now use Comet Server on your Ampere A1 Ultra VM. Having an ARM64 version of Comet Server is also useful for some on-prem scenarios. A lot of Synology NAS boxes will have an ARM CPU inside. So if there's a situation where you need a Comet Server installed on the customer's site, maybe this is interesting for you. And because it's all ARM, you can stretch right down to a Raspberry, but if you install a 64-bit distro on it, but don't expect great things from it. And I think there's a lot of promise with this trend in the industry. We're also familiar with obviously the Apple Silicon, the M1 MacBooks and Mac Minis having industry-leading performance. You can argue all day about Apple, but you can't argue with that performance. And it's really just hints of an industry-wide trend. More and more software is tending to go cross-platform or web-based, and there's a really good chance that you're able to take advantage of this better performing hardware. And so we're very pleased with Comet's really broad CPU and OS support in this area. Okay, back to some real new Comet stuff. There are 3 brand new options for retention policies in Comet. The new types are last something backups, at most 1 per day or per week or per month. Now, Comet has always had retention policy settings for keeping weekly or monthly sets of jobs. Say you want to keep the last 4 weeks worth of backups plus 1 backup a month for the last 12 months. That's always been possible in Comet, but the rules have been quite strict. Say we wanted to keep 1 backup monthly on the 1st of the month for the last 12 months, and that's exactly what you get. And if you didn't do a backup on the 1st of the month, then tough luck, nothing meets the criteria to be kept. And maybe that's what you want, but more likely it probably isn't. So in Comet 21.9 Voyager, we have now introduced these 3 new retention rules that instead let you say, keep a backup from each of the last 12 months, any day of the month, doesn't matter which. And if perish the thought we went a whole month without getting any good backups, then despite that, keep another month instead. Just count backwards 1 more month so that you've still got 12 months overall. So this, it keeps more backups than the existing daily, weekly, monthly options. And it achieves that by being a bit less precise about exactly which one it keeps. But overall, that does give you a bit more safety margin in the event that you're expecting to not capture every single backup you wanted. And so this is a really good deal to make. It's especially helpful for devices that are struggling to get a successful job. Maybe they're a laptop that's offline a lot. Keeping extra backups is probably helpful. So we would recommend evaluating whether you can switch to using these new retention policy types instead. And I've tried to explain it. There's quite a lot of subtle nuances about it. If my explanation didn't make it click for you, we also have this new chart available in the documentation that you might have more luck with. It's important to take your time to get a proper handle on exactly what is different here. Lock files. You might have ran into them if you use Comet. Now, I'm not talking about ransomware having locked your files or somehow locking your files for extra safety. We are now diving deep into Storage Vault internals for just a moment. So this topic is about cross-device coordination on plain storage. So Comet supports backing up to lots of different storage locations. Obviously, our very own Comet Server Storage role, which has all the smarts and intelligence, but also quite basic storage platforms like Amazon S3, S3 compatible platforms. On these kind of platforms, you can put files, delete files, and not much else. And so our whole algorithm of Comet, all the chunking that brings us our deduplication, incremental forever, client-side encryption, all of that fantastic technology is designed around this lowest common denominator storage where we can store files and not much else. And with Comet, you've got multiple separate PCs, all running backup jobs, adding and deleting files all the time. And in order to make that a safe thing to do on these quite rudimentary platforms, we do need some way to do cross-device coordination and using the only tools we have available, which is adding and deleting files. So while lock files may be annoying, they are less annoying than data loss. And so we're keeping them around. What we are announcing in the 21.9 series is a few changes to make lock files much easier to work with and to significantly reduce the amount of issues you might be seeing. To start with, Comet 21.9.1 just added more information about the device's name into the lock file error message to help you understand which customer device caused a problem. In the past, this message would just show the device ID, and you'd have to take that device ID, go to the Comet server, find the device, enable the ID column, and match it up to find out what device caused the issue. But Comet has all that information already. We can just show you the device name. It makes it a lot more clear. Maybe a laptop has been gone to sleep for a week, or someone's gone on holiday, or a PC has been decommissioned from the account. This just makes it much more immediately obvious what's going on, and it cuts down the amount of time you need to troubleshoot this issue. The next major change is in Comet 21.9.3, we changed the rules around which device is responsible for retention passes. Retention passes obviously have certain lock file requirements. They take a little bit longer to run than a regular backup job, or if a backup job includes a retention pass, it's going to make it take a little longer. And so what we wanted to do was prefer to run them on a high power, what we're calling a high power device if possible. And the goal we're aiming for is that if you've got a mix of servers and laptops sharing a single customer account, ideally it would be the servers that ran the retention passes. And that just cuts down the chance of a laptop going offline while it's doing something important. In terms of deciding clearly what counts as a high power device and what doesn't, it's something we can tweak over time as we get more feedback on this change. But in general, we're talking about the situation. So we've got a mix of always on, powerful PCs and some frequently offline weak laptops sharing a single account. We've picked some basic criteria that should roughly, approximately do a good job of picking between them. So we're looking for devices with over a week's uptime, or running Windows Server or Linux, and having more than 8 gigs of RAM. And if you meet 2 out of 3 of those, you're probably more likely to be the server than the laptop. And that's good enough for us. It doesn't have to be perfectly accurate. It's just a heuristic to try and smooth things out. It doesn't have to be perfect to be useful. Even if all the devices are badly misdetected, it's fine. Retention passes will continue to run the same as they always have. But it should really cut down on those issues with laptops going to sleep running a retention pass. And lastly, Comet 21.9.4 this week has introduced a major redesign of the locking system that allows backup jobs and retention passes to run fully simultaneously. This last bullet point is the most important change we've made to Comet in a long time. I've been bearing the lead here somewhat because this is such a fundamental part of how Comet works, but at the same time, our goal with Comet is to make you not notice this at all. If you've even heard about lock files before today, then my condolences, and I'm sorry we haven't quite managed to fully cover them up until now, but we're getting very, very close. And with this change in particular, so up till now, the retention pass has had to take exclusive control of the storage vault. Well, that's no longer the case. The storage vault no longer requires any quiet time to run a retention pass. Retention passes can run fully seamlessly despite any other running backup operations. And it's taken us a while to get to this point because we were unwilling to give up any safety properties. And we've come up with a way to maintain safety throughout this by bringing in some really cool algorithms. In particular, a two-phase concurrent mark sweep algorithm is used. Take some inspiration if you're familiar with garbage collection algorithms from programming language theory. It works by splitting the retention pass into two separate phases. First of all, we mark chunks that are eligible for deletion, and then we can actually sweep them up later. And with a lot of careful coordination, we've found a way to do both of these two phases separately, safely, concurrently, simultaneously within a Comet backup. So you don't have to do anything at your end. This will all happen automatically, starting with the 21.9.4 upgrade. Once the update has rolled out to all the devices in the storage vault, it's completely automatic. You'll just see less error messages. So all three of these bullet points, they're all major enhancements. Every one we add significantly reduces the likelihood that you will encounter a lock file issue. 90% less here, another 90% less here, another 90% less. Overall, it should make a dramatic improvement. The work is not over though, and we have a few more tricks up our sleeve that hopefully you'll be hearing about soon. Moving right along, just a brief one for this. Comet is time zone aware. Every customer account has a time zone field. It gets filled in automatically when the device is registered for the first time. If you have customers in different time zones, then you can say something like, "Oh, run my backups at 9 p.m. in the evening," and it will figure out what that means in the customer's local time zone. Down here in New Zealand, we've only got one main time zone. We do have a second time zone for the Chatham Islands. Total population 600 out of our team of 5 million for the whole country. So the Chatham Islands does get overlooked a bit, but time zones are much more important if you're in a country like the US or Australia, where if your business serves an area near the time zone boundaries, it's very realistic to have customers in multiple time zones. So Comet has supported this since day one. Obviously, we've got time zone support. What's new in the Comet 21.9 Voyager series is the ability to have different time zones on a per device basis. So maybe you've got a single Comet user account that has, most of the devices in US Pacific, and then there's one guy who works remotely from US Mountain. And what that would do in the past is create a conflict between the job scheduler, which looks at the customer's PC time, and the missed backup jobs injection, which looks at the user profile's time on the server. And if you had multiple time zones in the account, there can only be one time zone for the whole account. And these two things wouldn't match anymore. You get this beating pattern of missed, success, missed, success. If a job runs an hour early or an hour late, and a missed job would appear on the actual scheduled time, but it's not a real missed. It was just because there was this confusion about exactly what time zone is the customer really in. And this has become more of an issue recently because of the rapid growth in remote offices and working from home. So in the past, we've known this was a problem for a while, but we didn't put much priority on solving it because there's this implicit assumption that any devices sharing an account are probably all in the same office and they all share the same time zone, and it just didn't really come up. But as we've grown, larger as a company, we've seen more diverse scenarios, and obviously with the pandemic massively accelerating remote work or semi-remote work, we started hitting this issue more often, and now it's solved. So you can now have multiple devices, share an account, and have those people be in different time zones. No more weird problems with extra missed jobs. The last thing to say about this is that you can also use the view button here on these tables in the web interface to turn on the optional time zone column to see that information come through. I'm not sure if you've ever tried to click the view button, but actually a lot of the table views in Comet have some hidden extra columns that provide this kind of extra detail that's often useful. The main one off the top of my head is on the live connection actions. There's a hidden column for IP address. Custom webhook headers. So Comet Server has a webhook feature. This is something for API developers, I guess. You might find it interesting, even if you're not an API developer. A webhook is something that you can configure in Comet Server, and then every time something happens, job starts, job finishes, new account created, customer settings change, so on, Comet Server can push out a notification to an external system. And this is useful for reconciliation, management, reporting systems. We've had this feature for a while. It's a bit hidden because you have to set it up via the config file or the API instead of in the config, in the setup wizard. What's new in Comet 21.9 Voyager is the ability to put custom headers on the webhook post requests. It's quite a generic feature, and if you let it simmer in your mind for a few minutes, you'll very quickly think of different ways you might want to make use of this. But probably the most important one is for authorization headers. So if you've built a system that is relying on these, job started, job finished signals, then it's very important to try and ensure that the signal really did come from Comet Server and not from a completely different Comet Server or something that's only pretending to be a Comet Server. And so by putting a custom authorization header in, you can create a kind of secret token to help ensure that. Disk image restore from web. Just moving right along, nearly through everything I want to cover. Just a few more cool things to point out. This is kind of another COVID-related feature. So Comet supports taking bare metal disk image backups of a Windows PC while it's running. And then later on, if you really need to, you can restore that backup as a bare metal disk-to-disk, re-imaging the physical disks back from the backup copy. And this has always been possible from the desktop app. And I guess that's kind of because the main scenario is, you've got a PC on your workbench, it's pulled to pieces, you've unscrewed the hard drive, and you're probably going to go into the BIOS and tell it to boot from our built-in USB recovery media feature in Comet that makes a bootable USB flash drive for you. But of course, the world has other plans. We came across an interesting scenario, which is how do you assist someone in doing this remotely? And with this new feature, disk image restore via web, so now you can create your USB recovery meter, mail it to the customer, get them on the phone, tell them to plug it in, boot up the PC, and then remote control. You'll take it from there, do the rest of the disk image restore remotely by remote control from the web interface. So that's quite cool. Same workflow as the desktop app, so it supports all the same things as the desktop app, where you go to restore a snapshot in the web interface and it prompts you, do you want to treat it as VMDK files for virtual boot, or do you want to do a real bare metal partition restore? Just click next, and you get to see the source disks and partitions, the available target destinations. Just click the source and destination, click add to queue, hit the restore button, all by remote control. So that is disk image restore via web. On the subject of fun things to manage remotely, you might have seen in the news that Windows 11 will be released on October 5th. That's only a week away. Rest assured that Comet does, of course, work fine on Windows 11. Whatever problems you're going to have, they won't be from Comet. And if you're on the fence about the Windows 11 upgrade, then if you've got other options right in front of you. And while I'm on the subject of previewing upcoming things, Setup Wizard redesign. So let's start off with a look at the current design of the Setup Wizard as it looks today in the Comet Server web interface. We've been on several support calls recently helping people where you have to change something inside the Setup Wizard and you get in and you make your change and then you have to click next through the wizard to get to the save button at the end. And I bet that is a familiar experience to many of the people watching this today. So I'm going to give you a sneak preview of something new that we've been working on. It's not final by any means, but this is something we're looking to release soon just to make it that much easier to get to where that setting that you need to get to a bit faster. On one hand, I'll be sad to see the old setup wizard go. It's been a staple of Comet for over 5 years now. And we actually built it on purpose deliberately instead of a full settings screen in order to make sure that you get that little taste of the whole breadth of Comet settings. But from using the new layout a couple of times, you don't want to go back. It's so much faster to get to where you need to go. It's clearly a major improvement. Just needs a few more finishing touches, and then we'll land it soon in a future version of Comet. That's all I have for today. Are there any questions? Just to recap, I talked about anti-ransomware and the new integration with Backblaze B2 to only hide files instead of deleting them. I mentioned that Comet Server now supports ARM64 servers. The 3 new retention policy options for daily, weekly, monthly. Lock files and how they display the proper device name, how they'll try and run on the server instead of the laptop, and how they can now run fully concurrently with other backup jobs that are simultaneously taking place, thanks to the new concurrent mark and sweep GC design. I talked about time zones, how you can now have multiple devices in the same account with different time zones. Disk image, and how you can now remotely initiate a disk image restore from the web interface. Some quick previews for Windows 11 out next week, and a preview of our new setup wizard design that you'll see the full detail in a future release. Might not have any questions today. That's easy for me. But we still want to hear from you. If you do have any questions, we're always happy to help out. We've recently invested further in growing our support team. We're more than happy to hear your questions by ticket through the usual ticket system at account.cometbackup.com. You know what? I didn't even mention the biggest change of all this month, which is that you can finally upload multiple attachments when creating a support ticket with us. What a relief. That's been a long time coming. So you can open a ticket with us, or you can email us, hello@cometbackup.com. Or do you know we do also support phone calls? So our company is based in New Zealand. We do have international support teams for round-the-clock level 1 technical support, but if you want a sales call or if you want any more advanced technical support or troubleshooting, we'll have to figure out a good time that suits both us in New Zealand and in your country. We've just had our daylight savings transition last weekend, and so now we're UTC plus 13. So just makes scheduling a little bit more complicated, but all you have to do is go to the Comet website, and at the bottom of the page, you click Contact Us, and there's an option to schedule a phone call with a time zone widget showing our available times, and it'll just work everything out for you. We're more than happy to jump on a call. Often that's a very quick way of clearing the air and getting answers to any questions you might have. So that's all from me. So please check out the latest version of Comet. Hope you're all keeping well and safe. And the webinar series has been hitting its monthly schedule pretty consistently. So I expect to see you all again in about a month's time. Cheers.